Dror, or I can say with my French accent, Dror. Thank you so much for joining me here.
Thank you. It's nice to be in person. I still feel a little strange talking to people and looking into their eyes.
2 years post-pandemic, we still feel that awkwardness. But I'm happy we're doing it in person in such an amazing space also at the Herman Miller showroom.
Yeah, I was saying, I think I'm going to take some chairs with me home. No one would notice. It's fine.
Dror, how do you describe your job to your kids?
Oh, wow, that's a great question. I just tell them I'm a writer.
Okay.
But with my father, it's a little harder. My father keeps asking me, but what do you actually do? So I told him, you know, I speak, I write, I give people advice, I write about this, I write about that. So he says, he said it's not clear enough. What does it say on your business card?
Exactly. What does it say on your business card?
So I told him it just says my name.
Just
nothing
your name.
Else.
What about on LinkedIn?
Also, it says, you know, rethinking work, cities, and money or finance. So it's a work in progress. It's not. I struggle calling myself names, and when I find a good one, I immediately change and become something else.
And what is also very interesting is for you not to find the perfect word for your title, while you wrote an amazing book where you had to find the perfect word to. Can you tell me more about Rethinking Real Estate?
The book was basically looking at how technology is going to change a lot of the basic assumptions that we have about the built world. So our thoughts about the meaning of location, the meaning of visibility, the meaning of accessibility, the power of regulation to kind of tell people what they can or cannot do with physical spaces. And it basically outlined a lot of what we've seen play out since then with COVID, when suddenly we realized that people have much more choice in terms of where they go to work and how they work and also how they live and even how they study and how they entertain themselves and how they date and how they do all sorts of other things. Basically the whole idea of presence. And the bottom line of it is that real estate and offices are moving from a world of where the world is like a game of Monopoly, let's say, where you own a little square or box, and then because you control it, it means that everybody else now owes you something or will do whatever you say, to a game of chess, kind of like a game of strategy. It still has boxes and squares, and owning a square or controlling a square is still very important, but now suddenly you constantly have to think about what everybody else is doing all the time. So it's a much more exhausting game, much more creative game. And it requires people to think in all sorts of new ways. I was trying to give them some comparisons from other industries and even from the history of offices and houses and shops itself to kind of show how we can imagine things to be a little different from how they were pre-COVID and how they might be. So, you know, one of the things I try to do in the book is also to help people see that the world as it is around us is not something that is God-given or that we should take for granted, that it can be different and also that it was different not so long ago. And we're here in the center of Manhattan in this, you know, beautiful corner of Park Avenue. And 100 years ago, more people lived in Manhattan than today, for example. And since then, of course, Manhattan has grown, but it's mostly grown in offices and not in apartments. So people, you know, it's not that people suddenly decided to leave the city during COVID, but cities are pushing people away. They're saying, okay, it's going to be really, really expensive here. Yeah. We're not going to invest in the best education possible. We're not going to, you know, have a safe street for you or like a pleasant environment for kids. So they're basically saying, okay, we're forcing you to move out, but please come here to work because we're going to build these huge offices and these big train stations that only go in and out of the city to bring people to their offices. And again, it's easy to imagine a different world where, you know, we'll build more houses, maybe take down some offices, or at least balance, so that more people live here and work here and fewer people need to drive in and out. And those people that actually want to go and have a different lifestyle, whether it is in a suburb 20 miles from here or it's in Portugal, don't have to drive in here every day and definitely don't need to do that at the same time and have traffic jams and everything else. But, you know, they can live their own lifestyle and then they can come by train every now and then and, you know, and walk and enjoy the things that are only available
I would even
here.
say that should be on the agenda of companies, because what we hear a lot about is companies are struggling with attracting like employees back to the office, having their offices half full, half empty, however we want to say it. So they should be on board with that new agenda, like helping cities to like accommodate more work and life balances inside their housing or inside their buildings.
Yeah, and even more than just helping them, really pushing them, telling them, listen, you want to attract talent, you want good people that pay taxes and, you know, abide the law and build nice things and go to theater and support all sorts of great institutions in the city. this is the lifestyle that they need, let's move in that direction. But it's kind of tricky because in a way, the short-term interests of both the cities and the landlords and the employers and their long-term interests are in a bit of a conflict. I kind of call it the urbanizer's dilemma, where on the one hand, for example, now there's talk in New York about doing congestion pricing, like preventing more cars from coming into the city, making the city more walkable, closing more streets. So everybody knows that long-term, this is what the city needs to become. But on the other hand, in the short term, the landlords and the employers and the city officials are saying, no, but we want as many as people as possible to come now, and people are driving cars, so let's make it easier for them to drive and make parking even cheaper, or build more parking spots, or require buildings to build even more parking, which is, maybe it will bring a few more people over the next couple of years, but that means you're going in the wrong direction. That's not, the city of the future is exactly the opposite of this. And to balance these interests is very, very tricky. And again, especially when there's money on the line and there's politics and different organizations that move very slowly. And
it is really eye-opening for me, because we've been talking about the future of work is beyond the walls of the office. What you just brought up, it's like there are forces that are way beyond the walls of the offices that either play for or against you because of the short-term or long-term views.
I think the good thing about it, at least, when in many big cities, especially in New York in particular, obviously the real estate industry is very strong and the large employers are very strong. And until now, I think, pre-COVID, most landlords and even employers were very focused about their, it's like, okay, this is my building, I care about this, or this is my floor or workspace and I care about that, and I need to make it attractive, and that's all that matters, it's all under my control. I think now they're starting to understand that just focusing on your building or your floor is just not going to be enough. You need to change the whole city, the whole neighborhood to make it attractive to people. Otherwise, they're not going to come. Doesn't matter how fancy your building will be if people are not going to, if the commute is unpleasant and it's not nice to walk in the street and people don't have a convenient place to live nearby, then they're just not going to come to that office or to that floor and maybe go to work for a different company. So it kind of creates an incentive for them to care much more about the city more broadly and other things that happen into it rather than just to worry about their own little square.
I think you had recently a very funny phrase that said, if you want to attract people back to the office, turn your office into a restaurant.
We saw, in New York, I only meant it half jokingly, because in New York you see that actually restaurants are busier than they were before COVID, not just that they're back to normal. And offices are about 40-50% below their occupancy, according to density sensors, I'm sure, and others. And it's telling you something, because a lot of that work activity now happens in cafes and in restaurants. And people want to hang out, they want to work in person, they want to think, they want to bump into other people, but they want to do that in spaces that are designed for that. And a lot of employers and landlords are saying, yes, we're going to bring hospitality into the office, but you're also kind of thinking, okay, but instead of adding some little token things that try to make the office more into a restaurant, at least as an employer, if your employees want to go and hang out at a restaurant, let them go and hang out in a restaurant. Which kind of comes back to something I should have said maybe earlier, that question about how can we bring people back, I don't like that question so much, because, maybe you don't have to bring people back, Maybe there's something else here that will attract them, and it's still going to be in the city, but it's not the office and it's not the space as you already designed it. Maybe it has to be something else. And one of the few smart things that I wrote in my book before COVID was that, the office of the future is not a place. It's a network of locations that enable people to do whatever it is that they need to do at that moment to be productive and happy. And from an employer's perspective, it's a network that enables you to be attractive to people, to give them access to different things that they need. And they can be practical things like a place to record a video interview or a podcast, or to edit something, or to access some specialized equipment. Or they can be a space, special for working quietly, or for socializing, or for impressing your client, or for discussing something with your team. All of these things are not a single place, and unless you're a very big company that's building a huge campus, you cannot also build all of them inside your own space. And even if you can build it, it's going to be much more efficient and much better for the environment if these spaces are shared by multiple people. So don't just build a podcasting studio that people only use for an hour a week, but be in a city and make it easy for people to access those resources to make sure that they're used all the time. And of course, that will make them as well more fun and more interesting rather than whatever it is that you can build on your own.
Thank you so much, Dror.
Thank you.
Such an amazing conversation.
It's been really fun, and I already feel more acclimated to the post-COVID world now, having a real conversation. with those bright lights.
I know. Thank you.
Thank you.